Peter Mandelson, Prince of Darkness. Hello, I'm H.G. Tudor. Those of you in the United Kingdom will be familiar with Peter Mandelson. He is a British politician, lobbyist and diplomat. He was Member of Parliament for Hartlepool from 1992 to 2004, and he served in the cabinets of Tony Blair and Gordon Brown as Minister without Portfolio, Secretary of State for Northern Ireland, Business Secretary and First Secretary of State. He has never really gone away from politics and diplomacy, and recently was British Ambassador to the United States, although his tenure was cut short as a consequence of revelations about his involvement and friendship and emails with Jeffrey Epstein. He basically was one of the first people to whom the term spin doctor was applied, and he gained the nickname Prince of Darkness, although some of the red-top tabloids called him the Princess of Darkness as a consequence of the fact that he is gay. He also would get the name Mandy, and I recall many years ago him complaining to Piers Morgan about the fact that he was called Princess of Darkness and Mandy, and he found it tiresome. He is an interesting individual, such as the level of influence that he has exhibited and the fact that he has continued to show that influence even though he's no longer an MP, in relation to the government of Keir Starmer. He'd been an advisor to Keir Starmer in the past, and he co-founded a lobbying firm, Global Counsel, and remained active in Labour politics, preceding their return to office at the 2024 general election. He's been involved in several scandals, as you will hear, which merits examination as to the type of individual he is. He's that kind of character who has never really gone away in respect of British politics. And, for instance, a recent newspaper article recalled the time that somebody went for dinner with him. And that revealed interesting aspects of his personality. The journalist recalls, "I always remember a dinner with Peter Mandelson for two reasons. He had said he didn't want to make a fuss, but then sent his 3 security guys in to sweep the small Brighton restaurant we were going to. This was during party conference season, while startled diners looked on. Then he made a dramatic entrance. Of course he did. That, of course, is redolent of somebody that requires attention, suggesting the possibility of needing fuel, the requirement to make an entrance. The second reason came at the end of the meal. After the gossipy chatter over the mains, he is as funny, clever and charismatic as everyone says, he insisted on the sticky toffee pudding for dessert. As often happens, the waitress said it would take longer to arrive than the other desserts. Mandelson, who was Northern Ireland Secretary at the time, demanded to talk to someone else. Grandiosity, and haughtiness, in effect, demonstrating the "do you know who I am" mentality. Another waiter came, who reiterated the sticky toffee pudding will still take 20 minutes. Mandelson got very sulky because his time, it was impressed upon us, was more valuable than anyone else's sense of entitlement, world revolving around him. In that moment it was clear what he wanted mattered most, and these people serving him were nothing to him. Why would they be? They were little people in a provincial bistro. They were of no use. It was certainly the case that Mandelson could switch on the charm, but only with those he deemed worthy of it. And clearly this was the case that he turned on this charm in relation to others like Jeffrey Epstein, who he referred to as his best pal. Mandelson wrote in a birthday letter to Epstein, "Once upon a time, an intelligent, sharp-witted man they call Mysterious parachuted into my life." And you might wonder how he apparently didn't notice that his best pal was a paedophile. For instance, how do you hang out with a man who's surrounded by very young girls, or masseuses, in residences full of pictures of naked young women and not notice what's going on? Mandelson's excuse is that perhaps as a gay man he wasn't offered any children who'd been trafficked and prostituted. Right, so did he think all these people were just staff, insignificant girls? Were they just women to be dismissed? Were they of no importance to him? Maybe so. The question then is this: did they continue to not matter even though Epstein had been sent to prison? Apparently so, as Mandelson reportedly told him to fight for early release. This is, remember, after Epstein had pleaded guilty to procuring a child for prostitution in 2008. Mandelson is reported to have stayed in Epstein's apartment while Epstein was in prison. This was the apartment which had a massage parlour attached to Epstein's bedroom. Dozens of framed prosthetic eyeballs lined the entranceway walls as a nod to the fact that Epstein kept surveillance cameras all over the place. Pictures of nude or partially nude young women and girls were everywhere. To carry on being best pals with Epstein, Mandelson clearly dismissed all his victims as girls who did not matter, which demonstrates that prevailing attitude that people are simply objects there to be utilised. That's some instances arising from his behaviour at a dinner. But let's look at more of the behaviour of Peter Mandelson over time to make an assessment as to what he is. Grandiosity has often loomed large in the behaviour of Peter Mandelson. This was exhibited in his role in the creation of New Labour during the 1980s and 1990s. As Labour's Director of Communications under Neil Kinnock, Mandelson orchestrated the party's rebranding, positioning himself as the indispensable architect of its revival. Grandiosity, centre of the universe. He was one of the first to be labelled a spin doctor, a term that underscores his belief in his own mastery over narrative and reality. This exhibits his conviction that he alone can shape outcomes and derive fuel from the admiration of allies like Tony Blair, who once declared that the New Labour project would be incomplete until the party learned to love Peter. This statement reflects Mandelson's grandiose self-view, where he inserts himself as the central figure in a political renaissance, demanding affection and loyalty as his due. His grandiosity isn't subtle. He revelled in his nickname, the Prince of Darkness, which highlights his perceived ruthlessness and invincibility, which is part of his manipulative nature. This grandiosity repeated itself in Mandelson's multiple cabinet roles under Blair and Gordon Brown. Despite resigning twice from Blair's government, first in 1998 over an undeclared £373,000 loan from Jeffrey Robinson to buy a house, and again in 2001 over allegations of intervening in a passport application for an Indian billionaire, Mandelson consistently portrayed himself as the victim of unfair persecution rather than acknowledging his ethical lapses. This demonstrates classic entitlement, that the rules do not apply to Mandelson, and that any fallout is a smear against his superiority. His response to the 1998 scandal was to downplay it as mere oversight, insisting on his integrity while privately manoeuvring to return to power. His quick rehabilitation as EU Trade Commissioner in 2004 further exemplifies this. He viewed the position not as exile, but as a platform to demonstrate his global stature, boasting in interviews about his influence in Brussels. Grandiosity again. A more recent iteration of this grandiosity emerged in Mandelson's appointment as UK ambassador to the United States in early 2025. Despite his controversial history, including links as mentioned to Jeffrey Epstein, Mandelson accepted the role with an air of inevitability, as if his expertise in the dark arts of politics made him uniquely qualified to navigate relations with Donald Trump. In a CBS Face the Nation interview in May 2025, Mandelson described himself as a people person, capable of charming even the most difficult figures. A self-absorbed claim that ignored his reputation for backroom bullying. He clearly has a belief in his charm offensive as a tool for control, where Mandelson positions himself as the indispensable bridge between nations. The pattern recurs in Mandelson's lobbying career post-politics. Founding Global Counsel in 2010, he advised clients like Shell and TikTok, often with ties to China, and advocated for closer UK-China relations despite geopolitical tensions. In a 2025 speech at the University of Hong Kong, Mandelson called for reciprocity in economic dialogue, framing himself as a visionary statesman above partisan fray. These actions reveal grandiosity. He sees himself as operating on a higher plane, entitled to influence without scrutiny. It's clear that Mandelson has that insatiable need for fuel, the positive or negative emotional responses that affirm the narcissist's existence. Consider Mandelson's infamous 2001 declaration at the Hartlepool election count, "I am a fighter, not a quitter." This came amid the passport scandal, where Mandelson was accused of improperly influencing a citizenship application in exchange for donations to the Millennium Dome, a project he championed. Rather than retreating, Mandelson used the moment to garner fuel through defiance, portraying himself as resilient and drawing admiration from supporters. Mandelson's repeated returns to power, rejoining Blair's cabinet in 2008 as business secretary under Brown, illustrates that each comeback was in effect a Hoover manoeuvre, pulling in allies for renewed adulation. A further example is his association with Jeffrey Epstein, which culminated in his sacking as US ambassador on September the 11th. Court documents and emails revealed Mandelson referring to Epstein as "my best pal" in 2003 and staying at his Manhattan flat in 2009, residual benefit, during Epstein's incarceration for sex crimes. Despite the gravity, Mandelson admitted in a Politico interview that he fell for his lies, blame-shifting, but felt the association like an albatross around my neck, shifting blame to Epstein while minimising his own involvement, lack of accountability. Mandelson memoirs, The Third Man of 2010, provide further evidence. The book is laced with self-justification, positioning himself as the pivotal figure between Blair and Brown, deriving fuel from revelations that paint others as flawed while elevating his own role. Interviews promoting it, like the one with The Guardian in 2009, show Mandelson boasting about being New Labour's hitman, a role he claims he outgrew but clearly relished for the power and control that it conferred. In his dealings with the media, Mandelson's fuel-seeking is blatant. He once berated newspaper editors for unfavourable stories, earning his Prince of Darkness moniker for ruthless spin. A 2009 Financial Times interview reveals him criticising opponents with quotes like "entering a Faustian pact," "extracting negative fuel through provocation." Even in 2025, as ambassador, Mandelson praised Trump as a people person, after earlier calling him a bully, demonstrating, of course, the black and white thinking of the narcissist and the chameleon-like approach to interpersonal relationships which are exploited for his own needs. His orchestration of New Labour involved triangulating Blair, Brown and others, pitting them against each other to enable him to maintain control. Mandelson utilised the creation of rivalries to secure loyalty masterfully, acting as Blair's confidant while undermining Brown subtly. In the 2009 Guardian interview, Mandelson admitted to being the hard man, enforcing discipline through intimidation, a control tactic that ensured his centrality. The 1998 loan scandal exemplifies manipulation. Mandelson borrowed from Robinson without declaration, then gaslighted critics by claiming it was private, distorting facts to preserve control over his image. Similarly, in the passport affair, he allegedly pressured officials for the passport, denying it later despite there being evidence, a revision of history. Mandelson's Epstein ties reveal further manipulations. Emails show him arranging meetings with JP Morgan CEO Jamie Dimon via Epstein in 2009, levering the connection for influence while in government. This is the utilisation of the residual benefit of elite networks for control, discarding ethical concerns. In lobbying, Mandelson's Global Counsel advised controversial clients, manipulating policy debates for gain, demonstrating, of course, expeditious responses and an absence of emotional empathy. His advocacy for China ties, despite security concerns, shows control over discourse, positioning himself as the expert once again. A Reuters profile notes his charming but ruthless style, demonstrating once again how manipulative this individual is. In the Epstein Association, Mandelson maintained ties post-2006 conviction, staying at his home as mentioned in 2009 and contributing to a birthday book with affectionate notes. This behaviour shows zero empathy for Epstein's victims, prioritising his own networking over that of those individuals. When sacked in 2025, Mandelson focused on his albatross, not the victim's pain, a discard of moral responsibility. The passport scandal involved exploiting power for personal gain, indifferent to public trust erosion. Mandelson's denial and quick pivot to the EU role reflected devaluation of those affected, treating scandals as simply minor inconveniences which are dismissed. Politically, Mandelson's smears against Labour leftists showed an empathy deficit. A spin doctor, he marginalised them, viewing them as threats to his control rather than colleagues. He dismissed critics coldly, deriving fuel from their diminishment. He fuelled divisions for his benefit, as detailed in his memoirs, devaluing both Blair and Brown for his own personal elevation. He's engaged in smearing, spreading falsehoods to isolate targets. For instance, against Starbucks CEO Howard Schultz in 2009, Mandelson launched a tirade after criticism of the UK economy, calling him misguided, a smear to deflect blame. This protected his position as economic steward. In Labour infighting, Mandelson smeared Brown allies, portraying them as obstacles in media leaks. He did this for painting them black. Post-Epstein, Mandelson smeared the scandal as overblown, gaslighting the public while admitting partial faults to control damage. His 2025 response involved blaming Epstein, a deflection smear. Historically, as communications director, he smeared old Labour figures, rebranding them as outdated to elevate New Labour and himself. It's quite clear with Peter Mandelson that throughout his career, all that has mattered is Peter Mandelson. He certainly has a knack for reinvention and the bounce-back ability that is often seen with certain narcissists, particularly those who are more evolved. Repeatedly, he has been manipulative. He has played people against one another, operated with a sense of entitlement. He lacks accountability for his actions, seeing nothing wrong with what he does. He demonstrates a victim mentality through his blame shifting. He engages in grandiosity, belittlement of individuals. He shows many haughty behaviours and shows very many aspects of the narcissistic dynamic through his various behaviours. He is an individual that regards himself as superior to those around him, that routinely engages in chicanery, that puts the interests of Peter Mandelson first, and utilises his intelligence and charisma for the purposes of asserting control over people and nullifying those threats. He sees no difficulty in lining his own pockets and fraternising with a paedophile, dismissing any concerns in that regard. It's quite clear that Peter Mandelson is an individual who operates by exploiting interpersonal relationships, by failing to exhibit emotional empathy for those affected by his actions, that he demonstrates grandiosity and haughtiness, various aspects of the narcissistic dynamic through his repeated need to assert control and the way that he uses manipulations to nullify his threats to control. And it's quite clear that Peter Mandelson is a narcissist. I'm H.G. Tudor. Thank you for listening.